The hungry neighbor. There are days when, from the very morning, you know it's going to be a long one. I woke up in an empty apartment, and a wave of melancholy hit me so hard I could howl like a wolf. My wife, Svetka, went to her parents for a week. Her mother got sick and needed help. Of course, I let her go. What else could I do? Only, bachelor life hasn't been fun for me for a long time. All day at work, I kept thinking about getting home, flopping down on the couch, and watching football with a beer. Maybe I'd order pizza or swing by the Chinese place. I had grand plans, but the execution was a disaster. I got home around 8 in the evening, opened the fridge, and it was pure misery. Expired kefir, a wilted cucumber, and half an onion in a bag. Svetka had cleaned everything out before she left so nothing would spoil. Smart woman. And me, as always, forgot to stop by the store on the way. So I'm standing in front of this fridge, and my stomach is growling so loudly the neighbors can probably hear. I pull out my phone. Tried to order food, but there were notifications, account blocked, payment failed. My main card is being replaced, and the new one hasn't arrived yet. I have cash, but the couriers in our area only take cards. Well, I thought, that's my fate. I start walking to the store, even though it's 3 blocks away. I've already changed shoes, put on my jacket. Suddenly, the doorbell rings. Sharp, insistent. I open the door, and there's Nastia, my neighbor from the 5th floor. We usually just greeted each other, chatted a couple of times in the elevator about the weather. I knew she lived alone. Her husband works shifts somewhere far away, gone for months at a time. Attractive woman, about 32 or 33, no more. Dark hair, gray eyes, athletic figure, always fit and well-groomed. "Good evening," she says, and I immediately notice she's a bit embarrassed. "Sorry to bother you so late. Do you happen to have any salt? I'm cooking, and I just ran out." I invited her in, went to the kitchen, found the salt quickly, and handed her the pack. "Thank you so much." Nastia took the salt, but didn't leave. She looked at me kind of strangely. "Are you home alone?" "Yes," I said. My wife went to her parents for a week, not understanding where she was going with this. "Are you going to eat?" she asked, and there was a special note in her voice. "I just noticed you're wearing your jacket. Maybe you were about to go somewhere." "I was going to the store. The fridge is empty." Nastia smiled, and her smile was, I don't know how to explain it. Warm, maybe. "You know what?" she said. "I just finished making dinner upstairs. I made a roast with potatoes, cooked borscht. And eating alone is so dull. Maybe you'll keep me company. Otherwise half of it will go to waste anyway." I was taken aback, honestly. On one hand, it felt awkward. We hardly knew each other. On the other, hunger is no joke, and the smell coming from her was so good it made my mouth water. She must have been in the kitchen right before coming down. "I don't want to impose," I started, but she interrupted me. "What imposition? I'd really be glad. You know, when your husband is always away, there's no one even to talk to. The neighbors are all strangers, closed off. But you seem like a nice person." In the end, she convinced me. I took off my jacket, locked up my apartment, and went up with her to the 5th floor. First turn. We went into her place, and I immediately noticed it was exactly like ours, just decorated completely differently. Cozy, feminine. Candles everywhere, decorative pillows, paintings on the walls. It smelled like home, warmth. With Svetka, our place feels colder, more practical. "Make yourself comfortable," Nastia said, nodding at the table. "I'll set everything out." She bustled around the kitchen while I sat at the table and looked around. On the shelf were photos of Nastia with a man in his 40s, stocky, tough-looking. Wedding pictures, some trips together. But all the photos were clearly old, at least 3 or 4 years. No recent ones. Nastia brought out plates, poured borscht, sliced bread. She took the roast out of the oven, and the smell was so good I almost groaned with anticipation. "Enjoy your meal," she said, and sat across from me. We started eating, and the conversation just flowed naturally. Nastia turned out to be a very pleasant conversationalist, smart, with a good sense of humor. She told me she works as a freelance designer. Her husband, Artem, works up north on rotation, 2 months there, a week at home. He brings home good money, but she's tired of being alone. "You know," she said, pouring me some compote. "When someone's gone for months, you start to forget what it's like to live together. He comes back, and we're like strangers. He's used to his way there. I'm used to mine here. Then he leaves again, and the cycle repeats." I nodded, understanding her. Svetka and I have different problems. But the result is the same: alienation. My wife has become kind of cold these past 6 months. Always busy, always tired. I work, she works, at home we basically just sleep. There's almost no intimacy left, once a month, and even then out of obligation. But of course I didn't tell her that. Although Nastia looked at me like she knew anyway. We finished dinner, and I was about to leave, but Nastia offered tea. Or maybe something stronger, she added. I have some good cognac, Artem brought it. I hesitated, but she was already getting out the bottle and 2 glasses. Oh, come on, she smiled. One evening, you can relax. I haven't had a real conversation with anyone in 6 months. All our neighbors are so cold. Everyone keeps to themselves. We had a glass, then another. The cognac really was good, smooth. The conversation became more candid. Nastia admitted she was thinking about getting a divorce, tired of living with someone she barely sees, and when she does, she doesn't recognize him anymore. And you? She suddenly asked. Is everything okay in your family? I wanted to lie, to say everything was great. But the cognac loosened my tongue. Not really, I admitted. My wife had grown distant. I don't know what's happening, but we've become strangers living under the same roof. Nastia looked at me for a long moment. Do you know what's the scariest part? She said quietly. When there's someone next to you, but you still feel alone. That's worse than truly being alone. Silence hung in the air. I looked at her, and something inside me started to tense. The atmosphere changed, becoming denser, heavier. Nastia sat across from me, her eyes glinting in the dim light, the candles on the table flickering. Would you like more cognac? She asked, but her voice sounded different somehow. No, thank you, I replied. I should probably go. Why? Nastia stood up from the table and came closer. Where do you have to hurry to? There's no one at your place, and I have no one here. She stood very close. I could smell her perfume, something floral and light. My heart started beating faster. Nastia, I began, but she put her finger to my lips. Shoo, she whispered. We're both adults, both lonely. Why not make each other's evening a little brighter? And then I understood what was happening. She hadn't just invited me for dinner. She'd invited me to stay. A second turning point. I should have left. I knew I should have stood up and walked out. But her hand landed on my shoulder, and I froze. It had been a long, long time since I felt such desire. With Svetka, everything had become mechanical, bland. But here, no need to say anything. Nastia whispered, leaning closer. Just stay with me tonight. Tomorrow we'll go back to our lives, but tonight, let's forget everything. Her lips touched mine, and I lost control. My hands reached for her waist on their own. She responded with such hunger, as if she were starving. Not the usual kind of hunger. Hunger for closeness, warmth, touch. We moved to the bedroom. It was dark there, only a sliver of light from the living room slipping through the half-open door. Nastia pulled off her sweater, and I saw her silhouette. Beautiful, slender, desirable. She pulled me to her, and we fell onto the bed. What happened next? God, it had been so long since I felt that. Nastia was like fire, passionate, desperate, real. She wasn't shy about anything, wasn't pretending. With Svetka, everything had become cold, quick, emotionless. But here, I felt alive again, wanted, needed. We spent the whole night together. We fell asleep and woke up several times in each other's arms. Nastia hugged me, held me close, stroked my hair. She was tender and wild at the same time. In the morning, I woke up to sunlight. Nastia was sleeping next to me, covered by a blanket, her hair spread out on the pillow. I lay there looking at her, and gradually the realization of what I had done returned. Betrayal. I had cheated on my wife. Even if our relationship was falling apart, even if there had been nothing between us for a long time, I had still crossed the line. Guilt pressed on my chest, but at the same time, I couldn't deny it. I felt satisfied, alive. As if I had gone back to a time when I wasn't a worn-out workhorse, working myself to the bone and getting scraps of attention from my wife. I got up carefully, trying not to wake Nastia. I found my clothes scattered around the room and started getting dressed. But she woke up, opened her eyes, and looked at me. Are you leaving? She asked sleepily. Yeah, I need to go, I replied, buttoning my shirt. Thank you for everything. Nastia sat up in bed, holding the blanket to her chest. Don't thank me, she said. I enjoyed it too very much. I put on my shoes, and then she added, this will be our secret, right? Of course, I nodded. If you want to again. She paused. You know where to find me." I left her apartment and went down to my own on the third floor. The hallway was quiet. The neighbors were still asleep. I opened my apartment door and went inside. Emptiness, silence. Only the fridge was humming in the kitchen. I took a shower, trying to wash the night off me. But you can't wash away memories. I could still feel her scent, her touch, her warmth. Sveka called. I looked at the phone screen and hesitated for a second, but answered anyway. "Hi," I said, trying to sound normal. "Hi, honey." Her voice sounded tired. "How are you? Is everything okay?" "Yeah, everything's fine," I lied. "How's your mom?" "She's better now," she replied. "Listen, I might stay for a couple more days. You don't mind, do you?" "Of course not. Stay as long as you need." We talked a bit more about everyday stuff, and I ended the call. I sat on the couch and buried my face in my hands. What have I done? God, what have I done? The third turning point. 3 days passed. I tried not to think about what had happened, but the thoughts kept coming back. Every time I left my apartment, my heart would start beating faster. What if I ran into Nastia? What would I say to her? How would I act? But it was as if she had disappeared. We didn't run into each other in the stairwell or the yard, not even once. Sveka came home on Friday evening. I met her at the door, helped her with her bags. She looked tired but content. "I missed home so much," she said, walking into the room. "It's nice at Mom's, but home is better." We had dinner. I asked about her mother. She told me. Everything was as usual. An ordinary conversation. No warmth, no coldness. Just two people living under one roof. At night we went to bed. Sveka turned her back to me and fell asleep right away. I lay there staring at the ceiling, remembering how Nastia held me, kissed me, whispered things in my ear. The contrast was too sharp. On Saturday morning, I went outside to wash the car. And then I saw her. Nastia was standing by the entrance with some man. They were talking, and I immediately knew. It was her husband. The same Artyom from the photo. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a harsh face. Nastia saw me, and our eyes met. She gave a barely noticeable nod, then turned back to her husband. I quickly looked away and walked to my car. While I was washing the car, I couldn't stop thinking. She never said her husband was coming back. Did he return earlier than expected? Or did she know and just didn't tell me? I finished with the car and headed back to the entrance. Artyom was standing by the door, smoking. As I approached, he looked at me closely, studying me. "Hello," I said as I passed by. "Hey," he replied, then suddenly added, "You're from the third floor, right?" I stopped. "Yes, why?" "Just, Nastia mentioned you lent her some salt the other day." Artyom took a drag from his cigarette. "She said you're a good neighbor. Thanks for not refusing." "No problem." I mumbled and quickly entered the building. My heart was pounding. She told him about the salt. Just mentioned it in conversation. Or was it a test? Maybe he suspects something? I went up to my apartment and spent the rest of the day at home, trying not to think about it. But the thoughts wouldn't let go. Artyom didn't look like someone to joke with. If he finds out. On Sunday morning, the doorbell rang. Sveka was in the shower, so I went to answer. Nastia was standing on the doorstep. "Good morning," she said calmly. "Sorry to bother you. You gave me some salt, remember? I wanted to return it." She handed me the same packet of salt I'd given her that evening. "No need, keep it." I began, but she pressed the packet into my hand. "No, I insist." Her eyes looked straight into mine. "I always pay my debts." And then I understood. She hadn't just come to return the salt. She came to make it clear that it was over between us. Her husband was back, and that night was in the past. "Thank you for your hospitality that time," I said quietly. "For dinner." "Anytime," she smiled. "If you ever need anything, just ask. We're neighbors, after all." She turned and walked towards the stairs. And I stood there with the packet of salt in my hands, realizing this was her way of putting an end to it. The fourth week passed. Life went back to its usual routine. Work, home, Svetka, the daily grind. I thought about that night less and less, though sometimes, lying next to my wife, I caught myself wondering how things might have turned out if I were free, if I hadn't walked away that night. But those were foolish thoughts. Nastia had a husband, I had a wife. That night was a mistake, a momentary lapse, a moment of weakness. And it was good that it ended as it did. On Friday evening, I was coming home from work. I entered the building and saw our neighbor Valentina Petrovna on the first floor, an elderly woman who lived on the second floor. She was the house's main gossip, knew everything about everyone. "Oh, Misha," she called out to me. Did you hear the news? What news? I asked, pressing the elevator button. There was such a scandal on the 5th floor. Nastia and her husband are getting divorced. I froze. What? Yes. Valentina Petrovna was clearly enjoying the effect. Artyom caught her with a lover yesterday. Can you imagine? Right in their home. He came back from his shift earlier than expected, and she obviously wasn't expecting him. The blood drained from my face. And who? Who was the lover? I managed to ask. Someone from the neighboring building, they say. Artyom beat him up right in the apartment, then threw him out. The police came. It was such a commotion. Now he's kicking Nastia out, telling her to go live with her mother. What a story. The elevator arrived, and I stepped in on shaky legs. So she kept going. After that night, with someone else, Artyom came back early and caught them. I went up to my apartment and walked in. Svetka was sitting in the kitchen with her phone. Hi, she said, not looking up from the screen. Did you hear about the neighbor on the 5th floor? I heard. I muttered, taking off my shoes. Can you imagine? She cheated on her husband. Svetka shook her head. She always seemed so quiet. You'd never guess she was capable of something like that. I went into the kitchen, opened the fridge, took out some water. Well, you never know what goes on in people's families, I said, trying to sound indifferent. Maybe their relationship wasn't working out. What difference does it make? Svetka looked up at me. If it's not working, get a divorce. Why cheat? That's just cruel. I took a sip of water, feeling guilt gnawing at me again. Yeah, it's cruel, I agreed. Svetka went back to her phone, and I sat across from her, looking at my wife and thinking, what would she say if she found out about me? If she knew about that night? She'd probably call me cruel too. She'd kick me out, just like Artyom kicked out Nastia. And she'd be right. I lived with this burden for 3 weeks. Every day, seeing Svetka, I felt like a liar. She didn't know anything, lived her own life, worked, cooked dinner, watched TV shows. And I carried this secret inside me, and it ate away at me. I never saw Nastia again. Valentina Petrovna said she'd moved in with her mother, and Artyom filed for divorce. They said he wanted to find the lover and settle things properly, but the guy seemed to have vanished into thin air. I was grateful to fate that it wasn't me, that Artyom caught her with someone else, not me. But my gratitude was mixed with disgust for myself. I was her lover too. I'd lain in that bed with her. I'd just been lucky. One evening, lying next to Svetka in the dark, I couldn't hold it in anymore. Svetka, I called. She turned to me sleepily. Do you love me? She was silent for a moment, then answered, of course. What? I just feel like we've grown distant, I said. Like we live in the same apartment, but separately. Svetka sat up in bed, turned on the nightlight, and looked at me seriously. Misha, what are you talking about? She asked. What happened? I wanted to confess. I wanted to tell the whole truth. About Nastia, about that night, about how good it felt to be with her, because I missed intimacy. I wanted to lay it all out, to finally let that weight fall from my soul. But then I looked into my wife's eyes and understood. I couldn't. I had no right to destroy her life with my confession. It would be selfish to ease my own soul by passing the pain on to her. Nothing happened. I lied. Just tired from work. Let's go to bed. Svetka looked at me with doubt, but nodded and turned off the light. She lay back down and hugged me, and I lay there in her arms, realizing I would carry this burden for the rest of my life. That night with Nastia was the best and worst mistake of my life. The best, because I felt alive again. The worst, because now I have to live with this lie, looking into the eyes of the person I vowed to be faithful to. The salt that Nastia returned is still in our kitchen. Every time I see that pack, I remember that night. And every time I wonder if it was worth it. I have no answer. There is only memory, guilt, and the understanding that some decisions change you forever. And it doesn't matter anymore whether you regret them or not. They become part of you. A part you can't cut out, can't forget, can't fix. I just keep living. I work, come home, kiss my wife, cook dinners. I pretend everything is fine. A month after that scandal in the stairwell, a new tenant appeared on the 5th floor. A young couple with a child. Valentina Petrovna said that Artyom rented out his apartment and went back to his shift work. He never returned to our building. I never heard anything more about Nastia. Sometimes I catch myself wondering how she's doing. Did she remarry? Or does she still live alone, remembering the husband she lost in her search for warmth? Svetka and I started seeing a psychologist. It was my idea. I realized that if I wanted to save my marriage, something had to change. You can't just keep living, pretending everything is fine between you. At first, Svetka resisted, said that everything was already good. But I insisted, and she agreed. And you know what? It helped. We began to talk, really talk. Not about work or apartment bills, but about feelings, about what worries us, what we want from each other. It turned out Svetka also felt that distance. She just didn't know how to talk about it. She was afraid I'd stopped loving her, that we were together only out of habit. And I thought the same about her. We started spending more time together. Went to the movies, walked in the park, had dinners at restaurants, learning again to be a couple, not just roommates. And gradually, the warmth I sought in Nastia's embrace returned to our bed. But the memory of that night never went away. It lives in me, like a scar on my soul. Sometimes, passing by the 5th floor, I involuntarily glance at that door and remember. I remember the smell of candles, the taste of cognac, her hands on my back. Then I go home, hug Svetka, and realize I made the right choice. That morning, when I left Nastia, I made the right choice not to confess to my wife. I made the right choice to fight for my marriage instead of looking for the easy way out. That night taught me one thing. Intimacy should be sought not elsewhere, but at home. Sometimes that takes more effort than just giving in to temptation. But the result is worth it. The pack of salt still sits in our kitchen. Svetka once wanted to throw it away, said it was old. But I asked her to leave it, said it might still come in handy. In reality, it's my personal monument. A reminder of how easy it is to destroy everything. And of how important it is, every day, to choose the person you're with. To choose them again, no matter what. Nastia gave me a lesson. A cruel, but necessary one. And I'm grateful it didn't cost me my family.